Hello, everyone. This is On Tyranny. It's the radio branch of Ancient Greece Revisited. You can find us on YouTube, where we create short documentaries on ancient Greece, trying to discover the inceptual spirit of what made this great civilization. And in the middle of our production, this strange pandemic hit the world. And we felt that it was an event of such importance that it would be a shame if we had all this knowledge from the philosophy of ancient Greece and not being able to use it practically. And through my research, I stumbled on a very interesting article on the Mises Institute website. The article was called "The United Nations and the Origins of the Great Reset." I contacted the author, and I'm very happy to introduce him to you. He is Dr. and Professor Antony Mueller, a German who teaches in Brazil economics and has written extensively about the United Nations and their inceptual spirit, which is very different, or might be different, from what you think. It was different from what I thought. So with no further ado, Professor Mueller, thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I would like to congratulate you for your fantastic show, which is really an important contribution to understand what is going on. Thank you for having me.
Yes, exactly. We have much more questions than answers, and hopefully, if I can get one answer from each guest, I'll be a happy man. So, it's a very interesting combination. A German in Brazil. I mean, the thoughts that come to my mind are not very politically correct, but I think about a lot of the refugees that came out of Germany after the Second World War and went to Brazil. But even before that, there was some current, some cultural exchange, I guess you might even call it, between these two very, very different countries, right? So what's the relationship there, and has it affected you somehow?
Well, I came to Brazil in a very ordinary way with an official academic exchange program, and I landed by this exchange program in the southern part, and the southern part is actually very much dominated by German and Italian immigrants. The Portuguese and some others colonial powers sent their people first to the northeastern part, where I now live, and the Africans, the slaves, were also mainly in this northeastern part where I live right now, because that is where the sugar was grown.
Wow. And is it something that you can actually see every day? So when you go out, you
Yes,
look at
yes.
people's faces?
Yes, I mean, the colonial style, the Portuguese style of buildings is different from those that were brought from Italy, Germany, Poland, Ukraine. In the southern part, Sao Paulo has a very much domination, very high domination by Italians, and what probably very few people know, a large Japanese community that came to Brazil as immigrants in the period of coffee growth.
Yeah, yeah. I was wondering, you just said landed randomly. I can imagine you many, many years ago just boarding off the plane. I've lived abroad in a few countries, and I know that you can have a very strange affinity with these places who are not your places, but you can almost immediately, it's almost like a love affair, in that you might not know it at first, but then when you look back and you remember that first moment when you boarded off that plane, you know, yeah, kind of fell in love with that place the moment I saw it. Did you feel that vibration when you randomly, accidentally, like you said, came out in Brazil?
Well, anybody, I guess, has at some period of his life, probably as early as possible, some kind of dream. And my dream has always been the tropics, a warm climate. I have always hated coldness. And so it was my, let's say, illusion that when I came to southern Brazil, that it would be much more warmer than I then found out. In fact, they have terrible cold winters, and so I was not very happy that because of this program I came to this part of the country because I dreamed about a more moderate, a warmer climate. And then I got another offer to set up or help setting up a program, which was a big challenge I wanted to take even further to the south, and there it was terribly cold. So I said I cannot leave Brazil without living in the heart, in the historical heart of Brazil in the northeast. And so I finally got here at a federal university, and I've been living here now for over 10 years, and I feel very, very comfortable. Let's put it comfortable here.
Yeah, and as on your academic side, just reading that article, it's on the Mises Institute. So for people who don't know, von Mises was a German, I guess you could call him philosopher, economist for sure, and he's considered one of the forefathers of libertarianism, right? Hayek is obviously another one who came later. Mises was probably one of the first, very important, and obviously the Mises Institute is a libertarian institute. There's a website, there's productions. Do you consider yourself a libertarian?
I think, as originally European, we have in Europe and also in England the term liberal. And the term liberal was occupied in the United States as a left wing, as what we would call in Europe social democratic or left wing political orientation. So the original liberals were, let's call it, robbed of their name, and so they came up with the term libertarian. I have some kind of inner resistance to call myself with this made-up term that comes from America, because my roots, intellectual roots, are more in the classical liberal position that you can call, for example, Locke or even Immanuel Kant as the original thinkers of this kind of a philosophy that I would even more accept the name individualism. But individualism, on the other hand, has another problem, because the human being is also a social being. So I think just call liberal in the European tradition, or classical liberal, would be okay. Libertarian has this very close connection to Murray Rothbard, and it is basically very American. And so one could even go ahead a step further. And a term I take from this direction to define my position more clearly would be pluralistic anarcho-capitalist. Yeah, pluralistic, that means we also have society, we have community, but basically in favor of the freedom of individuals, inclusive the role of communities, and to have a market dynamism of a free capitalist society, in the sense to let the productivity rise to get enough recourses. And so this position would be neither right nor left, nor individualistic, or let's say communist or something like that, but pluralistic. Yeah, and to use this name liberal, yeah, liberal, and it means pluralistic actually. I mean that most as much as possible, people are allowed to find their own way, and this would also include now not just individuals to find their own way, but also associations, groups to find their own way of living. Yes? So pluralistic capitalism, or even if you would say pluralistic anarcho-capitalism, that would be one part. And as to the political side, I am a favor of a system which already Aristotle mentions as a true democracy, different from the election that is now called democracy, that Aristotle put into the oligarchical systems, that the political representatives are selected, not elected, but selected by chance, to a kind of lottery, in English also called sortition, or as Hayek called it, demarchy.
So did Hayek also have this idea?
Well, yes, he put it forth. He did not elaborate much on it, but he mentioned it in his work on constitutional theory. And it has actually a very long tradition, as I mentioned, starting with Aristotle. But you also had it used in some city-states in Italy, in Venice partly. You had it practiced and still partially practiced in Switzerland. And there were several other places where it was right. But at that time, the problem was the following: the cities grew, Italy transformed itself into regions, into a state finally, similar to Germany. Other countries like France already had early on a relatively big country, a relatively big state, and you could not do it. But now we have technology. I mean, you just need the numbers of the citizen or some kind of social security number, and you make this selection process. And so it is a rational form of plebiscite. In Switzerland, they use the plebiscite for the small cantons. Yes, but you to have plebiscites for many issues, for big issues for a whole country, 80 million or 10 million and so on, is already a problem. And you would then get the most actives always, because many people will not vote. They will not go
Yeah,
to
and just
for
and just to explain what we're talking about the difference between just electing from a certain number of candidates, like it happens today, and
yes.
randomly picking someone and saying, you will be the judge in this case. So
Well,
just to give people listening, an idea, imagine if there's a big trial of politicians, of corrupt politicians, and instead of equally corrupt judges, the system was such that you would randomly pick 500 citizens. 500 was the number that condemned Socrates, who was not corrupt, but we can imagine that turned around of 500 random citizens, people listening from different countries as I speak. They can imagine the faces of their own politicians on trial by just random people, and that would probably be a very, very different outcome from what we would have today. Now, the state, and whatever opinion one might have about the recent events, the events of last year, the pandemic, as we call it, in or outside of quotes, okay, whatever the opinion might be, one thing is clear: the states plural, or perhaps even the world state, who knows, has moved in and taken a grip over society that has been unprecedented and unimaginable. Like, I never thought I would live to see a moment where the state could allow me or not to enter a cafe based upon whether I had a certain medical procedure and that I would need to carry a certification to prove that I had the procedure. And yet these laws are being passed just as we speak. In Greece they have. I know people in Ireland who have been reporting the same. In France, Macron almost passed these laws. There was a public outcry. So from what I understand, he retracted some for the moment. But throughout this year, the state has been encroaching in ways that have been unimaginable. And what I find just as unimaginable is the fact that people who should have spoken out have not spoken out. And when I say people, I mean individuals, and I mean groups. I mean people just like libertarians. Libertarians, to a large degree, have been a disappointment, because they have been trained all their lives to have their radars set on high alert every time the state comes in and tries to interfere. And now the state is interfering in absolutely everything, private and public, and libertarians are just not doing their jobs, I feel, with you as a big exception.
Well, I must disagree a little bit. In fact, various liberal or libertarian institutions, think tanks, have opposed very strongly what was being done starting in March, April 2020. For example, I was a strong opponent of the measures. Just when I looked at the model, I said I will write about the virus model as it was from the Imperial College in London produced, and I can see as an economist, knowing how models work, that it is false. And so I had a longer article, and it was published by the Lou Rockwell website, which is the largest website in this area of the world. Now, another institute where I have had connection with, the American Institute for Economic Research, I did not publish there because they had very many articles on the issue, and I could go on. Now, why did it not enter, let's say, the public? And here one has to observe it was blocked. It was blocked by what we call, by a big name, mainstream media. It was not discussed, it was excluded. And for example, I observed and have observed the situation very closely in Germany. Now, I found during this time many websites, many chat sites, podcasts, many YouTube channels that had a strong opposition against all you said, and was unimaginably, and there were even I personally experienced a number of high carat experts, renowned experts of this medical area, yes, of epidemiology, virology, and so on, and they were pushed out of the mainstream media. In the US, CNN. In Germany, the state channels, yes. And then you had these newspapers, yes, that also followed the New York Times. The New York Times, for example, just to call a few of these, let's call them mainstream, were from the beginning fully on the side of government to suppress any kind of individual response to the issue, and it has been going on ever since and ever more. And what has happened is you still have free opinion. You can express it in some channels and so on some podcasts and so on. But as to the main media and what the regular guy consumes, who has to work all day and comes home and he just takes a quick look at the main news of the main channel, they have not heard about that. It has been blocked out. So this is really what many people note, that is a big rift in society. Yes, those that believe everything the main media says, and those who have a more differentiated opinion based on studies.
Yes, yes, yes. This is important. This is fascinating stuff. And for people who are doubting the censorship, I can tell you there is a lot of censorship, even more than expected. I mean, I hate to repeat this phrase, Orwellian, but it's going to Orwellian levels, because nowadays, I mean, one of the most ridiculous cases perhaps would be Dr. Robert Malone, who was well, he's sometimes mentioned as the inventor of mRNA vaccines. Obviously, such technologies do not originate in a single person. So but he definitely was part of the core research for these vaccines that the whole world is flipping backwards to get, apparently. And he has spoken against them. I don't know if that's tragic or funny, the inventor himself, but he has spoken about the dangers of such vaccines, calling them gene therapy, which is, again, a term that is banned from mainstream media. You're not supposed to allow to mention it in such a way. But he, the inventor or the co-inventor or one of the core team members, said it's gene therapy, and he has been banned, censored from YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter account has gone down. So to me, it's somewhere between tragic and comic, because people keep on saying, follow the science, follow the science. If you're questioning all this, you're not following the science. But then you point to one of the inventors of these vaccines, and they go, oh no, that's not that science, the other science. As if there is two. But back in something you said in the beginning, you said that you had very early on, March 2020, you had a look at the data that came out of Imperial College London. And for people listening, this was the very early data that mandated the first lockdowns, that informed President Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, to do the first lockdowns in the United Kingdom. You had a look at this data and you said you could immediately look they were false. Please elaborate on that.
Well, you first, when you make a model, you need a sufficient amount of data. I mean, I cannot say, because some people play roulette with a revolver of 6 units, and so well, now I see we have already shot 5 times and nobody got killed. Now you can trigger in the 6th ammunition.
Yes.
And this is obviously ridiculous because you have to check not just one round of not roulette, Russian roulette, I wanted
Russian
to say,
roulette,
with this
yes.
pistol, Russian roulette, exactly. Then not to confuse. You need a database. I mean, in economics, you have that all of the time, that our database is poor for new events. Will the recession come? Yes. Will there be a boom? Or will there be a depression? There are always little basic one, and so you cannot exaggerate the consequences, which is very popular in economics too, yeah, where people predict a crash and so on. Now this time, this insufficient modeling drew, of course, a lot of attention. And it's the same thing that happens in economics. So now you're a prominent institute and they call it imminent crash ahead. Of course, you get this attention in the media. And now we have, different from a recession or some kind of boom, the prediction is mass death, mega death. Yes. I mean, this is a shocking thing, and it is absolutely irresponsible to predict this on the basis of a poor database. Now, when you look at the data more to the past, and that's what you have to do. You have to look not just of the last month, even when you study, make economic prediction. You go back several years or even more and see how is the rhythm, how is the wave, how does it form some kind of pattern. Now, in economics, the pattern are very erratic, but in this thing of the death rate, it is very clear. If you go, and I checked up, there's an institute, Euromomo, which registers the monthly, weekly death cases in most of the countries of Europe. And they also aggregate it on a European level. Now, you look at the number of deaths per week, and you see it very clearly that in Europe, particularly Northern Europe, the effect of the period of winter. All over the years, all along the years,
in general,
you have
the winters, yes.
Yes, in winter, old people die more frequently. That's behind. In the cold period, and even here in Brazil, now we have winter. People die more frequently than in summer, and this is very pronounced in. Actually, it's interesting, not very much pronounced in the very cold regions, in Norway and Sweden, but very pronounced in
Because
this
it's always
middle
winter
region.
there.
France, yes, it's always winter there. France, Belgium, Germany, Italy, Northern Italy. It was Northern Italy, do not forget, yes, and Spain, yes, because Spain has harsh winters in the central part. So you can see that quite clearly, and you go back, and it's every year. And in the past, there were periods where the relative death rate in this period was higher than in 2020. Imagine. Yes.
I mean,
so
just to be fair, the peak, from what I understand, was around March, so it's not exactly the dead of winter, is it?
Well, winter comes, and people get colds. People get influenza, and when your immune system is weak, when you're old, you're prone, to get more severe, often with the lungs. It was a common way to die for old people,
No, but
because of.
yeah, but I mean, does March count as winter?
Well,
Because
here
it's
comes another point that's interesting to know. And now it gets very interesting because, of course, the elder people die in the onset of the winter because they get influenza or other effects. And then in the second part of winter, and just to remember, my birthday is 22nd of February. Yes, I can remember many years where there still was horrible coldness and snow. Yes, so what happens then after February? In March, it gets this, especially in these countries like France, Belgium, Germany, and so on, parts of Spain, northern Italy, this kind of, there's even a special expression in German to call it. It's a weather which is cold, humid, partly warm. You go out and it seems warm, and then suddenly, in a few hours, the temperature drops and a harsh rain is going to fall, cold rain is going to fall. And this is the time when also younger people get affected by this thing. So this is it was a totally natural cycle that was absolutely exaggerated by these studies. And then when you look at that, now we have the data till middle of 21. You see that this rhythm continues. And now, very interesting right now, when there is summer in Europe, you know what? The data shows a submortality, extreme submortality. It is down to the regular. It's below the regular phase. Very drastic
yeah, and
cycle.
just to complement what you said there, because there's a few interesting points. This goes for Sweden as well, because Sweden was apparently the only country that did no lockdowns, or very, very light ones, and everyone. Again, it's crazy because you would think rationally that most states would be looking for a way to stop their lockdowns. But it's almost like they were looking for a way to excuse them. And when Sweden came out and was the only country that did not do lockdowns, everyone tried to demonize it instead of just saying, okay, we'll look from afar. We'll let them take the fall if indeed they do fall, and we might even say we told you so. But if they succeed, then we'll just jump and do what they did, which is not what happened. So as they were demonizing Sweden, they were talking about these hecatombs of dead people, this drastic increase of dead people. And what happened? And there's a great statistician. Don't remember his name by heart. I'm gonna post his name below because he's very, very interesting data scientist, world renowned. What he showed is that sometimes if you get a peak essentially that gets balanced from the year before or later, then it's very, very normal, because you just might have some people who were from your elderly population. You might have a percentage that just did not die randomly on year X, but they all died on year X plus 1. So X plus 1 had the aggregate of the normal death you'd expect in a year and the people who happened not to have died the year before for whatever reason. Maybe it was a very cold very warm winter. Maybe God rolled the dice a different way. Who knows? But when you have these delayed deaths, these deaths kind of owed from the past year, you get a spike in the deaths of the next year. But if the year following that, X plus 2, you get a decrease in deaths, then it's fine. This effect has a name in statistics, which I don't know. It's
Yes, exactly how you said. You have the same. So there's no difference between economic data and this virus data, and you can apply the same look at it. And it is a common error that I have seen with young students who love the data, who make prognosis. Well, and the peak was, as you said, in March, and then it fell down on a regular basis. Then you had another increase last year towards autumn and winter, and now as we enter or have entered summer, the rate of death, which is actually for me, let's put it the way, you cannot much deny if someone is dead or not. Different from what he died or she died. Yes, and so we have a drastic fall of the death rate, which totally confirms the rate. The wave. It is a regular wave. That makes it good for medicine, because you have regular waves much more than in economics. In economics, you have to be much more careful to make a prognosis than in this. So this was totally clear to me that it's exaggerated and wrong.
Right. So the question is then, why, oh why, are governments? We know that governments lie. We know that, although it's almost like some people have forgotten as of 2020. And I see people who were very skeptical about the government up until that year. Now they're just following every single word that comes out of the prime minister's mouth for some strange way. But we know we are still, hopefully people listening, skeptical of what governments say. And we know that governments often lie. The question is, why are they lying in a way that it seems to be counterproductive?
Yes, if you investigate, and it takes not much to find out that this event has been in preparation for quite a long time. And it was organized in a very interesting combination of the United Nations, of the World Economic Forum, and the World Health Organization. Now, this is very important. These are all these institutions, especially the World Health Organization and of course the World Economic Forum, are not purely governmental. They are largely private. The World Health Organization receives most of its money from the Bill Gates Foundation and a group of pharmaceutical companies, along with a few governments. That is now again the United States. Trump canceled the payment, and now Germany under Merkel jumped in and gave a huge amount of money to this organization. Now, one can now a little bit speculate what is behind. One has, first of all, that's what as an investigator, a criminal investigator, would ask first. Yes, follow the track of the money. Yes, so one can clearly see that in these organizations, the interest in making money is very strongly present, because especially the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization are powered by big companies. It's not the middle class, the small entrepreneur, even if he has 100 employees or is dominating in some area. This is the very, very big. companies that are behind the pharmaceutical companies. And of course, in the World Economic Forum, you have now this interesting combination of these mega companies and a very unsatisfying, from my perspective, relation that these have with the big shots in politics. I mean, they meet with a Chinese president. They have Angela Merkel from Germany has I don't know how many times she attended there and gave speeches. So we have here a new system which deserves a new name. You could call it, if you also like to use some fine Greek terms, plutocracy. We have a kind of plutocracy. That democracy that the original idea is of course not a democracy. Yes, it is, as Aristotle said, yes, it turns into oligarchy. Must from there, it is only a step to move towards a plutocracy. And now you have the following, yes, the media. These big companies control the private media. And the governments control the state media. And all these small private newspapers, small newspapers, regional newspapers have shrunk. Yes, I remember the time when each town, its region had its own regional newspapers. They shrunk and disappeared, and they used the texts from the big shots, big newspapers, and only have some kind of local news added to that. And so the talk is dominated. The public opinion, as one can say, is fully dominated by this combination. In other words, I mean, you go to a hotel, and the first thing when I'm alone for a speech or something, go to a hotel, I click on the television, yes, and then I have CNN. Yes, and I listen to it just automatically because Prince actually, but what is behind? I notice what is behind CNN, for example. Okay, then I switch to get some news, let's say from Germany. You have the Deutsche Welle, which is in the hand of the government. Yes, so, well, I'm more conscious now than before. But there were years ago when I did this automatically and felt myself well informed. Yes, but this is of course not the case, and they will shower you with propaganda in a horrible way. Why? And the answer I find is because, okay, money leads you somewhere. Yes, let's say love is not the other motive in this thing. Now you have to find what is the real greed that is going on. The greed that drives these people. It cannot be too much of money because they already have that. And then I think you come to power, the pure greed of power, power in itself. I mean, power with not a purpose. You can use power to do something. But now in this level of these types of people, it is power per se. It is the power desire, the greed for power that makes them do that. And then you have to think, as I imagine sometimes, yes, what would a guy like these mega tyrants of the 20th century feel when they hear about so many people are in jail, so many people got killed? They get a pleasure out of that. I think this is hardly noticed that people, I don't want to use name, but everybody knows whom I'm talking about. They feel the pleasure of their own power. Yes, and this is, of course, in the history, it is called satanistic, devilish, anti-human. Yes, it's the greatest sin of all that one can imagine, because, okay, driven by sexual desires or driven by too much pleasure in other forms, individual forms. Okay, that is human, as we say. Must a person who wants power per se, yeah, who loves to make the people dance like puppets and wear masks and get controlled whether they can have whether they can meet. And now imagine the impact of that on young people and children. Yes, and now you see really I would really call it devilish pleasure. Yes, because the weakest get punished most. Yes, I have received little punishment by that. I could do
Yes, yes.
my classes online, and I'm old enough now not to run after this and that. Yes, but listen, imagine you are 16, 17, or even 25, and not to speak of the children who are locked out of their locked away from their friends. I mean, we can talk by internet and so on, but when you're 5, when you're 6, the social aspect, learning the social intelligence is so important, and they get locked out from the classes. Yes, and now all official data show that kids are under no threat at all. Even all of official data say that. That's also an interesting aspect.
Absolutely. And just to rewind just a little bit, because you said so many interesting things. Now, obviously, people who might be listening might already be shouting, conspiracy theorist, conspiracy theorist. But I think we've heard enough of that. The, Here's the thing. I want to just focus from what he said on this craze for power. And even just before, you said something that's the weakest are most affected, and they get punished more. And I have to confess that I go out, I'll sit in restaurants, in cafes. I like that very much. And the waiters, they're all wearing masks. I don't, because I don't have to. Technically, I have to wear a mask as I'm walking in, and then I can take it out when I'm sitting. But in most, unless I'm asked politely, I won't even do that, and I'll just walk in without a mask, sit, order something, and I look at the waiters, and they wear these big masks, and they're usually patented with the brand of that restaurant, and in their mouth, where their mouth should be, you have the brand of the restaurant, and for a fleeting moment, I see them as slaves, and I'm like, I'm being served by people who have to wear these things 8, 9, 10 hours. I don't, because I'm a little bit higher up in the hierarchy. I can work remote, I can make enough money. I don't have a boss who can tell me to wear a mask. Um, Therefore, I'm just a little bit above them. But they, so already I can see this difference, this class difference being formed of people who can't do differently. They have to wear the shackles, and people who for the moment can escape them. Um, so yes, I understand what you say about the weakest, but just going one step back, you're talking about it's satanic, right? And I'd just like to focus there, because there's a lot of people who don't like to take this into any sort of metaphysics. And I respect them. I think we should always start from rational analysis. But what happens, I found, is that sometimes our vocabulary gets lost. There's no words to describe certain things. And then you look at other systems like Christianity, and it has words that fit what I'm observing better. It's not that I like using them. It's not that I'm the most believing Christian myself. I'm not. But their vocabulary is more useful to me when I'm trying to describe certain things that are happening. And the Christian concept of evil is very useful because evil is transpersonal. It's not about this particular individual. You know, you look at history, you look at Adolf Hitler, and your average historian today, who's very much trained in this reductionist, materialist framework, will probably explain Hitler's behavior as psychopathy. You know, as if all psychopaths rise to lead a nation into war. And then the other side of the equation, the German people, they'll say, oh, it's just inflation. So somehow inflation plus psychopathy can lead to the Third Reich. But no, you know, like, I'm willing to debate that. But the Christians have a different word. They say it's evil. There was an evil thing happening there, which went, let's say, through Hitler and through the German nation as an electrifying wave. It was bigger than any individual involved, including the leader of Germany at that time. I like that. I like that this vocabulary of Christianity gives me the words to explain what's happening. And when you said satanic, it immediately struck me. I said, I don't necessarily believe in the devil, but the word itself is very useful to understand what's going on. Do you agree?
Well, I think that if you accept this kind of looking at the world, which has a long tradition and it has, in fact, mainly Christian roots, you are much more careful to fall into the trap. You mentioned Germany, for example. The Christian community was the last to fall into the hands because they had to keep up some kind of warning that one can fall into this trap. And then
into the
you
hands
have
of the Third Reich, you mean?
Yes. At that time, the resistance was going on, so what is important about this point of view is to be on the alert, well, it comes in disguises. And you mentioned something interesting. Yes, that you did not know whether to laugh or to and so on. And this is exactly always a very funny side, a tragic funny side to tyranny. I mean, in retrospect, you just have to look at these guys. Yes, they are absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this is the amazing thing. Yes, and you cannot imagine how was it possible. Yes, and
that
you could
almost
anybody include not just of the century. Now look back at Louis XIV, etc. They all have this ridiculous way and so on. And now who is also very close to the World Economic Forum? Yes. And who, for me at least, I admit, also has some kind of ridiculous side to him, is Prince Charles. No? Prince Charles is very close, very active, and he is a representative of all of this thinking that is being made at the World Economic Forum. Yes, and now you bring it up. You brought it up. Now look at some of the videos made by or that show Klaus Schwab, the leader of the World Economic Forum. Yes, and when I first saw him speaking, yes, and I recommend all listeners to do that and check out some recent clips where Klaus Schwab explains the reset. Yes, I said he's the ideal man in a Hollywood movie to represent a Nazi dictator. Yes,
Many have said that. Yes.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, imagine, yeah, he is in this area, yeah, so long, but he has such a strange accent, such a
Such a
strange
strong. Yeah.
expression. Yes, and he has very close ties with China. Yes, very intimate ties. Some of his, I think one of his kids is married into some kind of power structure in China. And
Wow.
and so it is really amazing. And then you have Prince Charles do it. Yes. Well, we could also discuss about this line of the British royalty, and you have, of course, as a strong cooperative chancellor or the chancellor of Germany. Yes, who has this Angela Merkel, who has over the years, I think she has more honorary degrees gotten than any other prominent leader. Yes, imagine. She gets all these honorary titles, and where did she get from the latest honorary doctorate? From Johns Hopkins University. From Johns Hopkins University, which is instrumental, integrated into the pandemic. They have the website, they have a certain special science branches there, departments there, yes. And then you have the connection with the World Health Organization, and I recommend to anybody to make a quick research who is the head of the World Health Organization. Where does he come from? What does he do? Why is he still there? And the facts are surprising. So conspiracy.
The connections are there. The connection. I
Of
know that
course.
one journalist said, called people who call others conspiracy theorists, he called them coincidence theorists, because
Yes.
and the problem with coincidence theories is that they do explain the phenomenon, they try to explain, but they explained almost everything else. People who think that it's all random. Yes, they're right. It might be all random, but anything can be all random. In other words, people who have this quote-unquote theory that it's all coincidence, this theory, in quotes, does not have any predictive power. It cannot tell. So it's not a theory, right?
Well, Rothbard, yes, one of the libertarian thinkers, main libertarian thinkers, has said conspiracy, everything is a conspiracy. Of course, I mean, the Mises membership organization is a conspiracy. The Catholic Church is a conspiracy. Each political party is a conspiracy. In all parts, we conspire wherever we are. And then you look at the political party, you have the followers, you have the great mass of the followers who know more or less about what is going on. You have in this group, in the church, everywhere, in the university, you have a couple of people who hold the strings. Yes?
Yes,
And
I guess, yeah, the problem with people accepting this is that it's so global.
of
I
course, it's
mean,
everywhere.
yeah, but
Yes.
it has surprised even myself. I mean, the coordination of just the media around the world. You can have a Greek media, like newspaper, a newscaster say the same thing as a French did 5 minutes ago and a Brazilian 20 minutes ago. It's almost like they're coordinated by some higher level of power that we don't see, and it's this global coordination that has a lot of people not believing in this. You know?
Well, What has happened in the media? I just mentioned where the time of when I still saw the newspaper delivered to the home of my grandfather, and I started to read the newspaper when I was a kid, and there were local news and regional news and so on, and all of these step by step disappeared. Now, then, when I grew up, let's say the German television, they had correspondence that was one of my favorite uh, uh, parts. It's called the Mirror of the World, where correspondence reported from all over the world. Now, big newspapers had their correspondence in Rio and so on, and many parts of the world. And over the past decades, all of that was cut. It was cut down. It was too expensive to carry on. And now you have the main newspapers, the main television stations that almost exclusively depend on the news services. And here you have just a few. Yes, you have just a few news services where it's less than a handful that is important. And the newspaper have their subscription to it, and from there they get the news feed. And now, who controls these news agencies? Here too, it is easy to make a quick research and know who can dominate the media. And so there is this German sociologist who said that we have a reality of life in our modern situation, in our modern world. Yes, and that was the reality of life, was the dominant part throughout history. But we also have ever more, and it's growing, the media reality. Niklas Luhmann is his name, the media reality. And we live in a time where we are highly specialized in our work. We do some calculations and so on, or write some reports, or do some mechanical things. This is our life reality is very small, because all these things that happened in the past with this great reunifications of pilgrimages, of fasts and so on, feasts, and in Greece is famous for this kind of celebrations where people come together, and it's reality of life. Yes, you see other people, you talk to other people, and so on. Yes, but this has shrunk. This has very much shrunk. And now we are dominated by the media. And if you look, for example, I may compare. When I grew up, we went to school a couple of hours. We came home. We had our meal ready, and after the meal, we took about half an hour or so to make the homework, and then we were as pupils on our bikes, yeah, running around, organizing all our spare time under ourselves. We organized football matches, soccer, we organized these things. We organized campfires. We organized fishing. We did all that. We had our own community. And then the rule was, okay, come home earlier than night, than the night falls. Now you take this, and this dominated my life throughout my youth. You take a young person now. He does not want to go out anymore. They have longer school hours. They have a lot of things organized by the school. Yes, they do, or they are organized by their parents. And the little free time they have, they are happy, leave me alone, they go into video games. So they are completely immersed in the media reality, and they even this life thing is not really anymore any life experience. It's organized. It's another form of school. Okay, you have to do chess. Okay, you have to play a musical instrument. What was done at my time, and it was the time of the great rock musician that grew up of that, they did it from themselves, out of themselves. We all wanted to
And
play an
yeah,
instrument.
yeah, and now it seems that it's a vicious circle because the more we're being locked down, the more we are immersed in this virtual reality, and it's that virtual reality that pushes us to more lockdown.
Exactly.
So we have to think of a way out of this. We can't just leave it here. Like, what do you see as a solution?
Well, ironically, I published an article here at the Rothbard Institute. There is a Rothbard Institute in Brazil also. And I published an article there, and I selected a cartoon where a couple kicks out the television set. So this would be the first thing to do. Well, it's exaggerated. Stop listening to the main news. Stop listening to what in each country has this kind of main news. Yes, to avoid being showered by propaganda. Here in Brazil, the main channel is not by the government, but it's private, but it is in the hands of whoever, yes, and it is full of propaganda. I avoid it as much as I can, but once in a while I go out from my room and I pass to the kitchen, I pass through the living room, and the family is listening to Globo. I get a little shock. But it's all death and desperation, and even the shows they have, yeah, they are people. All are evil people in these shows, yeah. In the telenovelas, here,
yeah,
yes,
one thing that I actually noticed a long time ago with Netflix series is that most of the heroes are psychopaths. The heroes promoted now are psychopaths.
Yes.
Breaking Bad, Dexter, even Sherlock Holmes he says, I'm not a psychopath, I'm a sociopath. He's a bit of a psychopath. the new Sherlock Holmes. You have another one with Lucifer. You have you have all sorts. Mr. Robot, I remember. These are good ones. They are good series, and they're all the heroes, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are in between, like Breaking Bad. But they're all good series. They're all very well written and produced, enviable. But their heroes are all, in one way or another, psychopaths. And yeah, there's something about that promotion, I think.
Yeah, well, I made the joke. I'm quite sure that there is no alien invasion on the Earth. Why? Because the first information these aliens would receive from our world is what is being shown on television and in the movies. And they would learn that this planet we won't visit. I mean, these are the most vicious, the most cruel, the most horrible people imaginable. Just make a session, a whole day with Netflix or other Hollywood films and Hollywood productions, and you know that the world they show has actually nothing to do when you just shut down the television and go out and you go to your cafe and you go to your bars, and then you meet people, even strangers, where you feel comfortable with. And then you don't hear about a murder or very, very, very rarely, yes. And you don't hear about big cheatings. When you notice a cheating in your cafe, I mean, this would be a scandal if it's intentional. If you get the bill and you see an error, the first presumption is, okay, it is an error. You will not accuse your waiter to intentionally cheat you. But
Yes.
if there were a television show that they are all all cheaters, criminals, psychopaths, and so on, and absolutely cruel. Yes, and just imagine what are the popular movies, films, and so on. And so, ironically, just imagine your worldview. You would receive your full worldview from these movies, and you would not know how people on this earth really are in the
Yeah.
in the life reality as a
Yeah.
Lebenswirklichkeit.
Yes. Well, and with that, I think that's a good notion, and that's a good place to stop for now. I want to thank you very, very much. I know we only scratched on the surface, but already you said things that I think they're worth coming out and people listening. So I would like to thank you very much, and I would like to set up, a future appointment where we can go more into depth about the United Nations and about eugenics, which is a topic that we did not discuss, but it's very important. It would be a shame to kind of squeeze it now. So from my part, I want to thank you very much for being here.
Okay, thank you so much. Has been a great pleasure, and all my best wishes for your program. And let's look forward.
Yes, let's look forward. Thank you very much. So, people listening, this was On Tyranny. Stay safe, and better yet, stay free.